Hey everyone, I'm Jay Smith, and this is Bradley Kendall, and this is After Further Review. And tonight, we're going to be bringing you a very special preview episode of next season's college football playoff. Basically, this week we are going to go back over the teams that we selected as our favorites from each conference for the college football playoff for this upcoming season. We're going to dive into them a bit more in depth, starting with the ACC in just a second. But Bradley, after further review,
who's in?
Yeah.
That's the question we all want to know.
That is the question, and it's hard to believe we're already asking this. It's the middle of March.
Yep,
but we're
it's
already
basketball time, but hey,
yeah,
can never not talk about football.
That's absolutely right. We're already getting into the playoff for this coming season. Starting with the ACC, though, last week or the 2 weeks prior, I went with the Florida State Seminoles, and I kind of
good pick.
Yeah, I looked at and we talked about can Clemson repeat for the third time and win their third straight ACC championship? Is Louisville going to be able to step up? Is it going to be Florida State? It's probably going to be one of those three teams.
Mm-hmm.
I think we kind of agree that the Coastal is not quite there.
Not yet.
There are teams like Miami
Mm-hmm.
and Virginia Tech, who are obviously hopefully going to be pretty strong this year. And who knows, maybe a team like Georgia Tech may make a run.
But it's probably down to three, you're right.
Probably down to those three. And looking at FSU's schedule, they have Bama at a neutral location to open the season, which is a heck of a test. Luckily for
Nothing
them,
harder.
right? Luckily for them, it's not going to affect their conference.
No, but in terms of the playoff, it always could.
Oh yes, yeah, for sure. And then they play Clemson and Florida on the road. So two tough. It's not easy, obviously, to play at Clemson and then playing a rivalry game at the end of the season at Florida in the Swamp. It's going to be tricky. But they do have key games against Louisville and Miami at home.
Which is good this year for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, the thrashing that they got from Louisville last season, you would think that they'll be out for revenge in that game. In addition, with Miami, they lost by a point last year. You'd think they'd be out for revenge in that game as well. I think they lost 19-20.
I'm sure Jimbo will have it on the TV throughout the week.
Yeah, I don't think that it's a stretch to say they had a lackluster season this past year.
But in terms of them,
it kind of fell short of their expectations.
Yeah, they did close the season out well with the bowl win, though, in the Orange Bowl. For
they
sure.
did, yeah. They finished strong, but there was, more. They were aspiring to a little bit higher than what they achieved
No doubt.
this past season.
Especially with Dalvin Cooks last year.
Yeah. And I hear it'll be such a threat at the next level. But Derwin James is now healthy, and they have. It's Florida State. They're loaded with talent. I did read the other week that Jimbo is actually using a rather interesting motivational tactic. What he's doing is he's having players that underperform at practice, they wear the color orange because it's the color of all the routes. It's the color of Clemson. It's the color of Miami.
Florida.
It's the color of Florida. So by using that as a motivational tool, it's actually served its purpose fairly well. And again, they've circled games like Louisville and Miami that are going to be at Doak Campbell. Probably going to be night games. One of those is more than likely going to be game day.
No doubt.
And they've got, opening the season against Bama. They've got Clemson and Florida. Those are 5 huge games right there. And then they're still going to have an ACC schedule that some could argue is going to be stronger than it's been in the past. So Florida State has a tough road, don't get me wrong. But, we kind of talked about how it's probably going to be Louisville or Florida State. Mm-hmm. And my thought at this point is, obviously prior to the start of the regular season, is since that game between those two teams is at Florida State, that's why I'm giving the nod to the Seminoles.
Fair enough. Yeah, I like the pick with Florida State. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be picking them going into this year. Tremendous amount of talent. I went on the other side of the spectrum. I decided to go with Louisville, mainly because of the returning Heisman Trophy winner. You got Lamar Jackson. I know he's going to be losing a lot of pieces. He's got his 2 top wide receivers that are now going to the draft. But he still returns a lot. I mean, Bobby Petrino, heck of a coach, is able to get these guys ready for this season. And, with the threat behind the backfield that Lamar Jackson is, I think he just poses a threat to any defense, no matter where the game is.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, he obviously torched Clemson in the third quarter at the game this past season in Death Valley. He didn't finish
which was a bit odd.
Yeah, it was. It was a bit. So hopefully he can avoid that sophomore slump, because I would like to see him do well. But yeah, I think, and we kind of agree there that it's going to be between Louisville and Florida State. Not to say that Clemson's not going to be talented.
They've surprised us in the past.
Yeah, and it's impressive to go back-to-back ACC champs. But I just think the fact that it's more of a reloading year for Clemson, they have their quarterback situation sort of figured out.
Still in the making.
But until you start playing those games come August, you're not going to really know. And Florida State and especially Louisville have that figured out already.
And especially for Clemson, I mean, the tough start is just going to be right there immediately. I mean, they're going to have games right off the bat that's could possibly put them into a hole to start the year.
Yeah.
One of the other reasons I also went with Louisville, looking at their schedule, Honestly, besides the Florida State game and the Clemson game throughout the year, it's basically pretty easy. It's almost like a cakewalk. Now, I did say that about the end of the year last year when they had Kentucky and all those teams, but they did surprise us with a couple losses there. But, I mean, Purdue, Carolina's not going to be that good. You got Kent State, Murray State. Not really the strongest of teams, which could hurt them down the road if they, are fighting for a playoff spot.
But if they're blowing teams out like they did at the start of the last season, then,
It works both ways.
It does.
They're going to have to impress us, but there's plenty of opportunities, obviously, for big games like we said before. So I think it's going to be a toss-up. That one game, Louisville, Florida State, is going to determine everything.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the winner of that game not only plays in the ACC championship, I think they win, and I think that team, whoever wins that game, will play in the college
unless
football
something
playoff.
weird happens, 2-3 losses for each team.
Possibly, yeah. You just never know. I mean, you can have a game like last year with I know it didn't really affect anything in the long run, but UNC Florida State and the last second field goal and everything. So
it could always be the coastal spoiler in the ACC championship. You never know.
Absolutely. Moving on though to the Big Ten, for this conference, I had Penn State, and looking at their schedule, they do have tough away games against Ohio State. And Michigan State is an away game. They didn't have a great year last year, but you would think
Scott's returning.
You would think that it would be hard to go into Michigan State on the road and get a win. They do play Michigan at home, which is going to be big for them.
Yep.
And the rest of their schedule, really looking at it, it's just going to be a breeze. I mean, they're playing Akron, Georgia State, at Iowa, Indiana, Northwestern, Rutgers, Maryland. I mean, there's nobody.
Hopefully a bunch of wins there. I would hope so.
There's nobody on there that I'm really like, ooh, they might trip up the Nittany Lions.
Kind of like Louisville, I guess, in a way, like their schedule, the way it's balanced out.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, the only part of it that really looks meaty to me is about a little over halfway through, because they play, and this is really the gauntlet of their schedule, Michigan, at Ohio State, at Michigan State, back to back to back. No bye weeks.
Wow.
Everything up to that point should be a win. So at the worst, Penn State should be 9-3.
I'd say even just 10-2.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that they can win all of those other games convincingly, but I think they should be able to knock off Michigan State on the road. I think they have a good shot at beating Michigan at home, and it just depends on how Ohio State is at that point in the season. Penn State should, again, 9-3 worst case scenario, but I think 11, even undefeated season is not out of their reach if they play well, avoid injuries, and just don't not show up to a game.
Yeah, I mean, Trace McSorley returning, Heisman candidate going into this year, and proved to be a reliable starter at quarterback for Penn State. And Saquon Barkley, the running back, I believe he's coming back, and we've heard plenty of things about him. They're going to be a 1-2 duo in the backfield for sure.
And the fact that they were able to make it to the Rose Bowl last year, kind of have a bit of a breakout. I mean, I know Penn State obviously has a storied history, but the fact that they had such success towards the end of that season, they got into the Rose Bowl, they had a taste of that glory, that former glory that their fan base is so accustomed to and so hungry for. And I think they're hungry for it. I think they're ready. I think James Franklin is ready to put them back as a national powerhouse. And I really like Penn State going into this season. Their schedule plays to their favor. They have, I guess, one hard away game with Ohio State. Michigan State remains to be seen. But everything else for them should be a cakewalk.
And like we saw last year, I mean, you can lose a game against the team you're competing with, like Ohio State, and still find a way to make it to the playoffs. So Penn State may have the case to get revenge this year. I went, like I said, in the ACC, the other side of things, I went with Ohio State. One of the teams, obviously, they're going to be competing for the not only the Big Ten, but the playoff.
And you were high on Ohio State last season.
I was, and even as the youngest team, they were surprising everyone. Ran into a brick wall in Clemson to end the year, but I love what they return. I mean, outside, kind of like Louisville, they're returning their quarterback, which is huge. JT Barrett, proven reliable quarterback. Outside of that, they will be losing some on the outside, a little bit on the defense too, but they were the youngest team in the country, like I said before. And with Urban Meyers, the coach, I trust him to at least get them to a 10-2 season. You would think, if
and
not
with
better.
that, again, I mean, obviously, everybody knows the outcome of the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. They just got annihilated, but they still got experience. They made it there. They made it there, right? Some say deserved, some say not. But point is, they made it, and obviously, they did not put on the type of performance that they wanted to put on. So hopefully, that would, carry over, and you'd think that they'd want to get back to it and prove that they do belong there. They do belong in the college football playoff. And it is interesting because both now with the ACC and the Big Ten, I think we both agree it's going to come down to one particular game that's really going to be, and if I'm not mistaken, both Penn State and Ohio State are in the East
They're in the
division?
same division.
They're
I think it's
is it the East?
I think maybe it's the. I don't know actually, but I know they're in the same division.
Okay.
I don't know the actual name of it, but I know they're in the same one.
Yeah, they are in the Big Ten
Big Ten
East.
East? That makes sense,
And I'm
okay.
pretty sure Ohio State is in the Big Ten East.
But yeah, like the ACC, I mean, it's not
It'll
like
be
they're on
that-
opposite sides.
Yeah, it'll
It's
be
going to
that
be a
one
division
game.
race, yeah, which is going to be huge. I mean, especially if one team beats the other and they have the tiebreaker. Ohio State, a tough test to begin the year. I'm going to talk about this later against Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of unlike Penn State, they have a non-conference game that they can use for their resume
Yeah.
if they were to trip up later in the year. But Big Ten schedule is not overly tough. They play at Iowa, play Michigan State
And
at
that
home.
could be, and that's interesting you point that out because that could be huge. If you're looking at Penn State's non-conference schedule, it's pretty weak. I mean,
It
I just
is.
listed Akron, Georgia State. I mean,
Reminds me of Baylor.
that's weak. So if Ohio State gets a huge win against Oklahoma, who you know is going to be hyped up to start the season, and let's say they do falter against Penn State, if Penn State falters somewhere along the road, that one win may make the difference
in the season.
in the
Yeah.
season. Exactly. So I think it will come down to those two teams. And it is at Ohio State. The game is
which
at Ohio State,
it's
and that's
huge.
a hard
The
place to
crowd
win.
Can definitely win you a game.
So kind of on the flip side, because I picked Florida State because it was at home, but just feel better about Penn State's schedule. But I can see where you're coming from because that game is at home, and if they're able to get that big win against Oklahoma, that already puts them
It'll
well
skyrocket
above,
'em. Yep.
well above Penn State in terms of quality wins.
So two tough conferences to call, I would say so far.
Yeah, it's pretty
Especially
close.
in the spring right now. We don't know for sure yet what it's going to be like.
Well, moving on, we're going to look at the Big 12, and for the Big 12, I went with Oklahoma.
As did I.
Yeah, not
Yep.
really.
I know a lot of people are high on Oklahoma State.
Yes.
The team down in Stillwater.
Yes.
But I think
And
we both agreed on
they do
Oklahoma.
have Oklahoma does play Oklahoma State away this year,
Yeah.
which obviously that's a rivalry game, and anything can happen in that. And if Oklahoma State does get out, if they're able to win, and Oklahoma State goes home with a loss, then you're really not. It would just have to remain to be seen.
I did find it peculiar. I'm looking at the schedule now. It's not at the end of the year, actually. The Oklahoma
The
State
game is not?
It is not. It is November 4th, so about 5 weeks before the end of the year, which is
Who
a bit,
are they going to play
a bit
afterwards?
odd. They have TCU at Kansas and then West Virginia.
So
to
they're
close the
still
year out.
playing conference games
After
their
that. So
rivalry game.
it'll be middle. I guess you could say
Interesting.
middle of the year. So both teams still have a chance, even if one beats the other, to rise back up or even fall. I mean, like a game against West Virginia.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, Oklahoma, they have Texas and West Virginia at home. A lot of people said West Virginia may be a dark horse to win the
Never
Big
know.
12. And, we'll just have to see with Texas. A lot of transition still going on there. We can't expect for them to contend yet with like a perennial powerhouse like Oklahoma. We'll just have to remain like with Trey Sermon, their running back. I mean, he could be a difference maker. We just don't know yet.
got some big shoes to fill.
He
Mixon's
does.
gone.
He
Piron's
does.
gone. Yep.
But I think that Oklahoma, more so than the ACC in the Big Ten, Oklahoma is still kind of a little bit above everyone else. Oklahoma's here. It's almost like an SEC, but maybe not quite
Little
to
bit.
that extent.
Yeah.
And so until I see something from a West Virginia or an Oklahoma State that proves to me, okay, they can contend with Oklahoma, I feel like at this point you just have to give the nod to the Sooners.
I think you do until someone dethrones them at this point. And Oklahoma
Yeah.
State going to have one of the top offenses in the country. And we mentioned earlier that Ohio State plays Oklahoma. It's going to be at Ohio State. Which, if you're Oklahoma State, if you're thinking, hey, if Ohio State or if Oklahoma trips up there and we can knock them out later in the year, that basically takes out Oklahoma out of the playoff race. So. Never know. It'll be interesting, but having Baker Mayfield back with his offensive coordinator, that's just going to be huge. That's going to be hard to stop.
I feel like the guy's been there for 5 years.
As long as he doesn't get any more trouble with the cops and trying to run away, I think
Wasn't
he should be okay.
wasn't he playing against Clemson in the
He started
the
he started-
Orange Bowl, right?
Yeah.
That was 3-4 years ago.
He started at Texas Tech, I believe, and then finally
Maybe.
came to Oklahoma.
I don't know if he
guess
transferred
he sat out
or
a
what,
year,
but
so.
I feel like he's been playing forever.
Oh my gosh, God just needs to graduate already.
We'll move on though to the Pac-12, and for this conference, I kind of went with, I guess, a bit of a sleeper. I went with Colorado. They played well last season. They reminded me of the old Stanford, really in your face, punch you in the mouth, physical kind of football. Looking at their schedule, they have UCLA, Washington State, and Utah on the road. and then they're going to have Washington, Arizona, Cal, and USC at home.
It's not very easy.
It's not very easy, but I think the key there is USC and Washington at home.
Yep.
Because I'd say out of those 6, 7 teams, those are the two that really stick out. You know Washington's going to be good because Browning's back. He's going to be able to light up the scoreboard. And USC's going to be loaded. Will they have a coach that...
Helton's there now. He
Yeah.
seems like the guy.
We'll see with USC. I mean, I'd like to see them kind of get back to it at least being consistently decent. But I think having those 2 games at home will help
That's
Colorado,
huge.
and especially if they're able to play physical, maybe keep the score total down, make it a possession, a field management, whatever the term is. That's not the right term, but you know what I'm talking about, like field possession game,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
If they're able to do that to those kinds of teams, I think they have a pretty good shot at winning the Pac-12.
Which will not be an easy task because we saw a glimpse of last season what Sam Darnold at USC can do and what Jake Browning can do at Washington.
Yeah, they got some good quarterbacks in the Pac-12.
I went with the best quarterback of last year, Jake Browning in Washington. Losing John Ross, his top target, but he does have a guy stepping up that had 15 touchdowns last year. So that'll be his top target. Washington, kind of the same case as last year, I was kind of a doubter with them. Their non-conference schedule is very weak.
Yeah.
Rutgers, Montana, Fresno State, and right into Colorado. So not much preparation. I think what's just going to be huge is the fact that they were tested last year. Browning got the experience. They're returning
They made it to
bulk
the
of their
playoff.
defense.
Yeah.
So right now, until I see anything different, I'm going to go with Washington, just the team that I trust the most. A lot of people picking USC.
It is interesting because of how high I was on Washington last season.
switched roles.
And you were not. You were like, nah,
Well, until
Washington.
they proved me wrong, I was not going to believe them.
And I mean, honestly, again, I thought about it for a long time before I picked Colorado, and I was like, I was high on Washington. I really like Browning. I thought he should have, at least had a chance at the Heisman.
And maybe the Pac-12 championship's just fresh in my head, and I'm not giving Colorado its due.
Possibly, but
but
I just think at the end of the day, I really was impressed with Colorado's defense. And they're talented, obviously, and they're young, so they're all coming back, and that should just continue to.
Yeah.
They should just continue to improve. And speaking of improving, I was reading a stat where it said that Colorado won 7 more conference games than last season, which is the best improvement in conference play in Pac-12 history.
That's why McIntyre won Coach of the Year.
Huge turnaround. Huge turnaround. Will they be able to sustain that this coming season? I'm not sure. I mean, I think that they will be able to because their defense is returning, and that's really that was their strong suit last season. But that remains to be seen. And obviously, I would say that Washington is for sure the safe pick.
Oh, no
Because
doubt, yeah.
Browning.
We don't know what USC is going to be
line
yet.
up
We've
still
seen them be
for.
hyped up before. They got kind of the
USC,
Michigan
you're
treatment.
never really sure.
So we'll see what goes on there. But yeah, like you were saying about Colorado, it's a system. They've got a system that's been proven to work, and they can just throw anybody in there. Some random quarterback came in last year during the Pac-12 championship and actually did pretty well. So remains to be seen. But yeah, I think the Pac-12 is slowly rising back up after Oregon fell off. It's starting to get more teams that can compete.
Deeper conference. It's
Absolutely.
becoming a deeper
No doubt
conference
about it.
now,
Yep.
for sure. Last conference that we're going to look at, obviously the SEC. I don't think there's really any discrepancy here.
If we tried to say any other team, people would laugh at us.
Yeah,
at this point.
it's still Alabama. Look at their schedule really quick. Obviously, they have that opener with Florida State. I don't know if has a location been determined yet.
It is in Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta.
Basically the second home for Bama.
So that's
pretty neutral.
That's neutral-ish. It's more neutral than like Dallas.
What's interesting is the game in Atlanta, the playoff is actually going to be in Atlanta. So you could see, is it the playoff or the championship? I can't quite remember. I know there's a
I think it's
postseason game there.
I think it's the championship.
Might be the
I
championship.
think it is the championship.
So you could see this again later in the year. You never know.
Well, they open with FSU. Then they're going to play Texas A&M and Auburn on the road. A&M will see how much of a threat they are. Obviously, Auburn on the road. That's always.
And then
you're
LSU.
You're circling that and paying attention to that. And they have Tennessee and LSU at home. They also do have Ole Miss and Arkansas. I can't really say that I would be too worried about Ole Miss and Arkansas.
Especially Ole Miss at this point.
But the SEC has proven me wrong before with perceived depth and teams being able to, may not be able to beat Alabama, but at least give them fits for 3 or more quarters.
And Tennessee's had success at Bryant-Denny Stadium before. We saw it a couple years ago when they nearly knocked off Bama, took them out of the playoff contention. So, the SEC right now, if Bama's going to be reigning at any time, this is the best time to do it because the SEC is just not quite there yet. I mean, Auburn will probably be top 15 preseason, but when you return their starting quarterback, Jalen Hurts, you got Bo Scarborough, top to bottom, I mean, they're bringing in recruits that are going to start immediately and be one of the top best in the conference.
I mean, obviously with them making the championship 2 years in a row and winning 2 years back and then losing this past season to Clemson, like that.
It's foolish to doubt them.
It is, and the game was so back and forth. Obviously, those were the two best teams in the country, and if somebody asked me, well, who do you think is losing more talent? I'd say Clemson's losing more talent.
I would say that too.
Clemson's losing almost everyone that was really an impact player on the field during that championship game. Alabama, they're losing maybe.
Jalen Hurts was a freshman. Let's not forget that.
So, they're still the team to beat. They're ridiculously consistent.
Best coach in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I get just as tired of it as y'all do from hearing it. But they play Florida State to open, then they go Fresno State, Colorado State, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss. Then they do have A&M, Arkansas, and Tennessee, and LSU. But other than that, they've got Mississippi State, Mercer, and Auburn. Should be cruise control.
That Florida State game, if it's not already said that it's going to be huge, it's going to be enormous. Because if anyone's going to have a chance to knock off Bama out of the playoff, if Florida State can put them at 0-1, the pressure is really on them.
Huge.
Because we have not seen a 2-loss team make the playoff yet.
Well, it's a huge ACC SEC season opener.
It's enormous.
Huge.
Yeah.
I think it's almost bigger than when Clemson and Georgia played.
Well, this will be 1 versus 2. So I mean, it's hard to.
Oh, you think they'll be ranked?
I would bet money on it right now.
So?
It'll be 1-2. Not only because they're probably the top 2 most talented teams, but for this build-up. I mean, college football would love that to start the year.
That would be why. Has that ever happened? Has the number 1, number 2 ever opened the season?
There's usually not many big games to start the year. Rarely even top 10 matchups.
Yeah,
so,
this is one year in particular coming up that I think is going to have a lot of good games the first week. Right before we get into conference play, we're going to have some really exciting matchups. And, obviously with how Florida State performed against Louisville last year in a big game, you could argue that Florida State may not show up, but I think they'll be ready. They have the entire offseason to prepare. They know what Bama was capable of. The question in everybody's minds is, can Florida State at least match it?
It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
It's going to be one thing they just need to get is an offensive line.
Yeah.
Francois was running for his life last year at quarterback. He's probably just getting over his concussions from this past season, but that's going to be huge. I know Jimbo Fisher's been hounding on that for basically the entire offseason. Just need to get that offensive line going. They've probably got a solid backup for Dalvin Cook, I would imagine. They're going to be tremendously talented. So.
That's Florida State. They're going to have
Florida
recruits.
State.
They're in the state of Florida. They're going to have recruits. But I think it's safe to say, though, after looking at all the different conferences, I know we had a few discrepancies in who we picked, but I think it's a very safe bet that at least 3 out of the 4 playoff teams for next season are right there in front of us.
I would bet money on it, at this point.
If not all 4. I mean, 2 without a doubt. I'd say 3 would be a good estimation, and maybe if we're lucky 4.
But I feel like there's a good amount of teams that can compete. We're seeing more and more teams starting to build the programs up, like USC. Oklahoma State is going to be good, Auburn potentially, and even Clemson.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Some of these are safe picks. Some of them more out on a limb. I guess you could say, Colorado's more out on a limb. There's nothing really. Alabama's safe. Oklahoma's pretty safe.
Either Florida State or Louisville's probably a safe pick.
That's safe. Ohio State, Penn State, that's probably pretty safe. But you're right, it's college football. We'll just have to see kind of what happens.
Going to the other side of things, not safe picks, and something you can never, ever guarantee is March Madness.
Absolutely.
And it's that time of year.
It is
First
that time.
games are tonight.
Going on right now, aren't they?
Going on right now. The playing games are happening.
We're missing them.
We got to hurry up so people can go watch them, yeah. I was reading it in an article. This was interesting. I'm sure many people have checked into this. In honor of March Madness, people were coming out with what would a March Madness college football bracket look like. And it's interesting. Obviously you won't have 64 teams or 68 teams because that just would never happen.
I'd love a 32-team.
You never have, but if you had a 16-team bracket, this is what they said that would happen last year. If you had, all right, so it's not just the 16 best teams. You have 16 not only conference qualifiers, but at-large bids. So not just Power 5 teams, but there's other teams in there.
So not just the Power 5.
Not just the Power 5.
Okay.
So you started out, you had your 1-16 matchup was Alabama and Appalachian State out of the Sun Belt Conference.
Goodness.
We know who probably win that one, but still interesting for App State to be there. Your number 9 seed would be USC as an at-large, playing Wisconsin as an at-large. Potentially Alabama, USC second round. That would be fun.
Man.
Your 12-5 would be, and we've seen 12-5 be huge in basketball.
Yeah.
Western Michigan and Penn State.
Oh, wow.
So your classic David versus Goliath there.
Western Michigan's the MAC.
They were out in the MAC, yeah.
MAC, yeah.
And, did okay in the game against Wisconsin in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
Number 13 seed was Temple, taking on number 4 Washington.
Ooh, that's Washington all day.
Lots of points scored there,
That's
but I think Washington would probably take that.
all day.
Number 14 was San Diego State, what's-his-face, Donald Pumphrey, the running back, and Ohio State, the 3-14 matchup.
Well, I'd say Ohio State, but after they performed in the Fiesta
Not when you
Bowl,
don't score any points.
I still would pick Ohio State.
I probably would too. Number 11, Florida State, and number 6, Michigan. What we actually got to see last year, the Florida State-Michigan game in the Orange Bowl. Florida State
and it was
did
an
win that.
amazing game.
Classic game.
Amazing game.
Number 10, Colorado. Number 7, Oklahoma. Defense versus offense right there.
Wow, that's
And then last but not least, number 15, Western Kentucky out of Conference USA, taking out our Clemson Tigers. Probably a safe bet to go to Clemson there. But honestly, like the 4-team playoff, I enjoy. I know people talk about this all the time.
I could see it going to 8 though.
8 eventually.
It's going to go.
I think 4 is set in stone for about 4 more years.
Please give me 16, because that would just be
it would.
amazing. Get rid of all these bowl games that nobody cares about.
You don't like the famous Idaho Potato Bowl?
No. Just give me like 3 weeks of a quality playoff. Because I know that you can't play more than 1 game a week. I get that.
Yeah.
And you don't want to have them playing 16, 17, 18 games.
But I mean, some of these teams we're talking about, like
but you could even cut the regular season. Like
take out the Montana game.
Get rid of these 2 or 3 games that you play a year that are meaningless.
Yeah.
They are meaningless. Either come up with a preseason or get rid of them. Play 10 games, 7 or 8 conference games. It doesn't matter, and then go straight to the postseason.
That would work perfectly. It's totally reasonable. And I mean, people are...
And conference championships could be a buy-in. I mean, like, you know...
People are complaining it'd be too much games. Teams already played 15 games. I mean, it's almost like an NFL season.
Clemson
was 14
They
and 1.
played 30 games this past
So, I mean,
2
if you're going to
seasons.
do a playoff, it's honestly probably the same thing at this point. I mean, maybe 1 more game tacked on to it.
I think it's just a money issue with the bowl games and sponsorships. But I think that 8 will probably be what it becomes, and people will be satisfied with 8.
Yeah, because at least 8 you can suffer a loss or 2 and not be completely
And if I'm not
out of it.
mistaken, the other issue really is this: the historically big bowl games are always played on New Year's, right? They're always played on New Year's.
New Year's 6.
Well,
yeah.
right. If those are like you'd have to make those like the second round, like the Final Four type of games, because if you play another round just to get to if those big historic bowl games are your first round, and then you have another round, and then you have a championship game, not only will you need more bowls, you're going to take up more weeks into NFL playoffs. And that's just not going to happen when it comes to money.
So start earlier then.
But they're not going to push back the dates of those bowl games. My thought is that they have to use those bowl games as they are. They'd have to either move up the start of the college football regular season, or they have to shorten it.
Yeah.
Get rid of a couple weeks, get rid of the bye week, like just something, because otherwise you're going to conflict with NFL playoffs, and that's too much of a money-making machine.
That's something I never thought
networks.
of. Detail-wise, you need to keep those games traditionally on New Year's Day, stuff like that. I
think
think they're moving
that's
it.
what they do.
Coming up soon, right? Because they did have one on like New Year's Eve, and now they're going to officially move to New Year's Day.
It's always been New Year's Eve, New Year's Day.
Yeah.
You have your 3 of your Big 6 on New Year's Eve, 3 of your Big 6 on New Year's Day, and the championship game is played on like the 9th?
It's Monday after
7th, maybe?
the next
7th,
week.
8th, 9th?
It's that Monday.
Yeah, so it's a week after. And then if then you have to go another week, you're getting pretty close to the Super Bowl. Like that's AFC, NFC championship time. You can't compete with that.
You can't do that. NFL is obviously the big boy.
Yeah, that won't happen. But I think it's an interesting conversation, especially when you look at the matchups.
Yeah.
You know,
and I mean, that gives you
intriguing.
room to not only expand the playoff, but throw in like a team like a Western Michigan.
Yeah.
Just give them a chance. I mean, because like college basketball, that's what makes it so great is you have upset picks, teams have a chance to play with some of the big boys.
And Western Michigan's going to get killed, but they still get to play.
They still get to play. And you've seen in the Fiesta Bowl and all that when UCF knocked off Baylor a couple years ago. It's not impossible.
Boise State beat Oklahoma.
It's not impossible. It could always happen.
And NIU, right? They played Florida State.
Yeah.
And they did
a couple years ago. Houston beat them. NIU beat them too, I believe.
Yeah,
so.
I remember they played in the Orange Bowl. NIU played in the Orange Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it can happen. However, it's more, it's probably unlikely. But I still think that 8 is probably what we'll see in the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, March Madness is coming up. I know you're excited. You're a big basketball
kidding me?
head. So
That's
that's
the
all
best
that's
3
going to
weeks
be
of the
on in
year.
the apartment for the next 3 weeks. But
do you have a Final Four now that we're bringing it up?
I have a
College
Final
basketball,
Four.
or do you have any picks that you're interested in?
I'm picking between Duke and Nova for the East. I'm going to go with Duke, from the East.
That's my boy.
I'm going to go with. Oh, gosh.
So we were talking about Duke on a playoff college football show.
I'm going to go with Louisville from the Midwest.
Okay.
I'm going to go with
ACC so far?
UCLA from the South. And I'm going to go with Notre Dame from the West.
3 ACC teams in there.
Yeah, I think.
No bias involved in there?
No, I think it's going to be between Duke and Nova, and then I think it's going to be between Louisville and Purdue, and then I've got UCLA playing UNC in the Elite Eight, and then I've got Gonzaga playing, or I've got Arizona playing Notre Dame.
Picks.
We'll see, though. I don't know.
We never
I beat
know.
you last year. Maybe I can
I
beat
don't
you
know
again
how.
this year.
I-
Yeah,
you-
I won the bracket challenge last year.
You
so
couldn't name one player on any of those teams.
We'll
you
see.
can find a way to beat me.
We'll see how well I do again this year, but that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this week's show.
We are doing a tournament challenge league. Just throw that in
Yes.
there real quick. After further review, very easy to remember. We'll tweet about it. We'll post about it.
Make sure to let y'all know.
Join our league. See if you can knock off the reigning champ.
Hey, man,
Hate to say it,
it's going to be
but-
hard to do.
Yep.
But no, that'll pretty much wrap it up for this week's show. Again, we just kind of wanted to go more in depth at each team that we had picked from each conference for the upcoming season for the College Bowl playoff. And hopefully, if we get all of our technical issues figured out, we should be able to do some call-ins. And in addition to the Twitter questions that we've been taking now for a while, we should be able to do call-ins coming after spring break. I'm looking forward to that.
We'll be off next week, spring break. But after that, hope
Back
to
in 2
resume.
weeks.
Back into it. Yeah.
So for Bradley Kendall, I'm Jay Smith, and this has been After Further Review.
Thanks for watching.